You are done here, George. Clear your desk, leave the building, and don't even think about claiming a dime of your accrued bonuses. You leaked our confidential bidding strategy, and we are terminating you for cause. Oh, and your precious estimating database. It's company property now. Bradley Caldwell sneered, sliding a security escort notice across the glass conference table. Tyler, his smug 29-year-old son, smiled from the corner, twirling an expensive gold pen. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply picked up my briefcase, looked at Bradley's crooked smile, and said, "Understood. The system will handle the transition." They thought they had just stolen the keys to a $145 million kingdom. They had no idea they had just walked into a legal and technical minefield of their own making. To understand how we arrived at that chilly morning in February of 2026, you have to go back 18 years to when I first walked through the doors of Caldwell Infrastructure Group. It was the summer of 2008. The company was still run by the original founder, Gerald Caldwell. Back then, CIG was a mid-sized regional contractor trying to survive the housing market crash by pivoting to heavy civil engineering and municipal infrastructure. I was 36 years old, a seasoned estimator with a master's degree in structural engineering and a knack for software development. Before joining CIG, I had spent 5 years developing a proprietary estimating platform called Bidmaster. I had registered it under my private entity, Vanguard Estimating Systems LLC. Bidmaster was not just a spreadsheet. It was an advanced cost estimation engine that used historical subcontractor performance, real-time material price indexes, and localized labor productivity algorithms to generate highly accurate bids. In public bidding, a mistake of 0.5% can mean losing a bid by a hair or winning a contract that bankrupts the company. Bidmaster was my proprietary intellectual property, fully registered with the United States Copyright Office. When Gerald Caldwell hired me as chief estimator in 2008, he knew CG couldn't afford to buy my software outright. So we structured a dual arrangement. I joined CG as a salaried employee at $165,000 a year, but we signed a separate, legally binding software license agreement between Vanguard Estimating Systems LLC and Caldwell Infrastructure Group. Under the terms of the license, CIG paid an annual maintenance and licensing fee of $45,000, payable on October 1st of every year. The contract explicitly stated that the license was non-transferable, and if CIG defaulted on the annual payments for more than 90 days, or if my employment was terminated without mutual written consent, the license would automatically revoke within 48 hours, and all access keys to the Vanguard cloud server hosting the MasterCost databases would be deactivated. For 17 years, this partnership was incredibly lucrative. Using Bidmaster, I helped CIG secure over $800 million in public contracts. Bridges, highway expansions, water treatment plants. Our bids were consistently razor-sharp, ensuring healthy profit margins while staying low enough to win public tenders. Gerald was an old-school gentleman who valued hard work. My employment contract also guaranteed me a performance bonus of 2% of the net profit of any successful bid I personally estimated and managed from initial RFP to contract award. Over the years, CIG paid those bonuses on time. Everything changed in late 2024 when Gerald suffered a stroke and retired, leaving the company in the hands of his nephew, Bradley Caldwell. Bradley had spent his career in country clubs and corporate marketing, having never stood on a job site or read a set of blue-collar technical specifications in his life. He was a classic corporate empty suit, obsessed with restructuring and reducing operational overhead to inflate short-term profits. He immediately brought in his son, Tyler, a recent business graduate who possessed his father's arrogance but none of his social polish. Tyler was appointed as junior project director, despite having zero experience in civil construction. The trouble started in October of 2025. When the annual $45,000 licensing invoice for Bidmaster was sent to the accounting department, Bradley personally blocked it. I received a notification from my automated billing system that the payment was past due. When I confronted Bradley in his executive suite, he waved his hand dismissively. "George, this is ridiculous," Bradley said, leaning back in his leather chair. "You are an employee of this company. The work you do here and the database you use belongs to Caldwell Infrastructure Group. We are not paying a separate entity $45,000 a year for software that our own chief estimator runs on our servers. I maintained my composure. Bradley, Bidmaster is owned by Vanguard Estimating Systems, LLC. It was developed and copyrighted before I ever signed an employment contract here. CIG does not own the software. You only license the database tables and pricing algorithms. The contract Gerald signed in 2008 makes it very clear that the license is contingent on the annual maintenance fee. Times have changed, George. Tyler chimed in from the side couch. We are modernizing CG. We don't pay double for internal assets. Keep using the program, or we'll just have our IT department clone it onto our local servers. You're getting a salary, aren't you? The local software is just a shell, Tyler, I explained calmly. The engine that calculates the risk factors and live material pricing runs on Vanguard's cloud servers. Without the API key connection, the local database will revert to static, outdated templates. Bradley laughed. We'll see about that. Just focus on the Hamilton County Transit Hub bid. That is a $145 million project. We need that bid submitted by mid-February, and I want it to be perfect. Don't let your little side project distract you from your real job. I walked out of his office without another word. I immediately documented the conversation in an email to Bradley, copying my personal address and explicitly stating that CIG was now in breach of the software license agreement. I also contacted my longtime attorney and friend, Alan Fletcher. We reviewed the contract. The 90-day grace period for the payment default would expire on January 1, 2026. After that date, Vanguard Estimating Systems had the absolute legal right to revoke CIG's access keys and demand a complete halt to all usage of the software. But I didn't pull the plug on January 1st. I knew Bradley and Tyler were planning something, and I needed to see how far their greed would take them. The Hamilton County Transit Hub and Highway Expansion Project was CIG's primary target for the year. The bidding process was fierce, and CIG's main competitor, Apex Civil Group, was also bidding on the project. I began working on the initial estimation, utilizing the Bidmaster platform to analyze the massive volume of concrete, steel excavation, and labor required. As the calendar turned to January of 2026, I noticed strange activity. Tyler Caldwell was suddenly very interested in my estimation files. He began requesting access to the raw database tables, specifically the local subcontractor rate sheets. Little did they know, they were setting up their own trap, and I was going to let them walk right into it. By mid-January of 2026, the estimation process for the Hamilton County Transit Hub was in full swing. The project was massive, requiring over 60,000 cubic yards of structural concrete, 10,000 tons of reinforcing steel, and a complex multi-phase maintenance of traffic schedule. My job was to synthesize all these variables into a bid that was low enough to win, but high enough to protect CIG from financial ruin. One afternoon, Tyler Caldwell walked into my office. He didn't knock. He dropped a thick binder onto my desk, sending a cloud of dust over my dual-screen monitors. George, I've got the concrete subcontractor numbers for the project, Tyler said, leaning over my desk with a smug grin. We are going with Miller Materials for the entire concrete and aggregate supply package. I need you to plug their numbers into the master estimate. I opened the binder and reviewed the quote. Miller Materials was offering to supply the concrete and aggregate for $36.8 million. I frowned and immediately opened the Bidmaster terminal on my screen to cross-reference their numbers. In my database, I had the historical pricing index for every major concrete supplier in the state, along with their certification records and safety history. Tyler, this quote is $36.8 million, I said. That is $4.8 million higher than the market rate. Cleveland Concrete Corp. submitted a fully certified bid of $28 million. Why would we pay an extra $4.8 million? Miller Materials has guaranteed capacity for a project of this scale, Tyler replied quickly, though his eyes darted away. My dad and I have already approved them as the sole source concrete subcontractor. Just put their numbers in. I dug deeper into my database. The records on Miller Materials were alarming. Tyler, did you review their pre-qualification files? In August of 2024, Miller Materials supplied the aggregate for the Route 71 overpass project. The concrete failed the 28-day compressive strength test by 15%. The state forced the contractor to tear down 2 bridge abutments and re-pour them. That cost millions and delayed the project by 5 months. More importantly, Miller Materials is currently not certified by the Ohio Department of Transportation for bridge deck concrete. If we include them as our primary concrete subcontractor, the Hamilton County Bidding Commission will disqualify CIG's bid on the spot under Ohio Revised Code Section 9.312, which requires all bidders to be responsive and responsible. Tyler's face flushed red. That was a localized curing issue, not a material failure, and the certification is being resolved. Donald Miller is a personal friend of our family. Well, he's my uncle, if you must know. He is fast-tracking the certification. Just do as you're told, George. Adjust the other line items. Inflate the excavation and labor estimates by 15% across the board to absorb the $4.8 million markup. Nobody at the county is going to notice a minor padding in earthworks. I stared at him, my voice flat. You want me to intentionally inflate public bidding numbers by $4.8 million and falsify labor estimates to cover an uncertified subcontractor owned by your uncle? That is not estimation, Tyler. That is bid rigging and public procurement fraud. I will not sign off on a certified bid estimate that contains these numbers. You don't have a choice, George, Tyler snapped, grabbing the binder. My dad runs CG now. Gerald is gone. You either write this bid the way we want it, or we'll find someone who will. That evening, I wrote a formal internal memorandum. I addressed it to Bradley Caldwell, Executive VP of Operations, with a copy to the company's compliance officer. In the memo, I detailed the structural safety risks of using Miller Materials, their lack of state certification, and the mathematical absurdity of inflating the excavation line items by 15%. I attached the historical testing reports from the Route 71 overpass failure, which I had exported from my Bidmaster database. I ended the memo by stating that as chief estimator, I would only certify a bid that utilized Cleveland Concrete Corp. Or another pre-qualified, certified supplier. 2 days later, on February 10, 2026, I was summoned to the main executive boardroom. When I walked in, I saw Bradley Caldwell sitting at the head of the long glass table. Tyler was standing next to him, alongside the head of our Human Resources Department, and 2 security guards. The atmosphere was ice cold. "Have a seat, George," Bradley said, his voice dripping with false concern. I sat down, placing my notebook on the table. "I assume this is about the Hamilton County bid memo?" "No, George, this is about your treason," Bradley said, throwing a printed document onto the glass. I picked it up. It was a printed email chain. The header showed my company email address, sending CG's proprietary subcontractor rate sheets and pricing templates to Lawrence Stone, the CEO of Apex Civil Group, our primary competitor. The message read, "Lawrence, here are the rates CIG is planning to use for the Hamilton County bid. Adjust your numbers accordingly to underbid us by 2%. I looked at the printout, then at Bradley. The email was a clumsy fabrication. The IP routing headers in the email format were completely wrong, and the language was entirely unlike anything I would ever write. "This is a fake, Bradley," I said calmly. "I have never emailed Lawrence Stone in my life. A simple audit of our Exchange server will show this email was never sent from my account." "We don't have time for a forensic audit, George," Tyler sneered. "We found this during a routine IT security scan of your outgoing traffic yesterday. You leaked our confidential bidding strategy to Apex Civil Group. You are done here. Clear your desk, leave the building, and don't even think about claiming a dime of your accrued bonuses. You leaked our confidential bidding strategy, and we are terminating you for cause. Oh, and your precious estimating database? It's company property now. We are enforcing the for-cause termination clause in your contract," Bradley added, leaning forward. "This means you forfeit your $320,000 in accrued bonuses from the Warren County, Route 42, and Mason retail projects. You also forfeit any claims to a commission on the Hamilton County bid. And as for your software, Bidmaster, our IT department has already isolated the server and copied the local database files. It is an internal operational asset. You will not touch it." The HR director slid the termination paperwork toward me. "Please sign here, George, to acknowledge your termination." I looked at the document, then at the smug faces of Bradley and Tyler. They thought they had executed a masterclass in corporate execution. They thought they had saved CIG $320,000 in bonuses and secured a $4.8 million kickback from Miller Materials, all while stealing my life's work. I didn't sign the paper. I simply stood up, picked up my personal briefcase, and looked at Bradley's crooked smile. "Understood," I said quietly. "The system will handle the transition." The security guards escorted me down to my office. I was given exactly 10 minutes to pack my personal belongings into a cardboard box. Tyler stood in the doorway, watching me with a smug grin, twirling his gold bun. I didn't say a word. I packed my framed photos, my desk clock, and my personal notebook. As I walked out of the building, I could hear Tyler laughing with one of the estimators. They thought they had won. They had no idea I had been waiting for this exact moment. I drove home in silence, the cardboard box sitting on the passenger seat of my truck. By the time I walked through my front door, I had already shifted from an employee to a business owner, protecting his intellectual property. I went straight to my home office and dialed Alan Fletcher. "Alan, it happened," I said, putting the phone on speaker as I booted up my personal workstation. "Bradley and Tyler fired me this morning. They fabricated a fake email, accusing me of leaking rate sheets to Apex Civil Group. They're withholding my $320,000 in accrued bonuses and claiming ownership of the Bidmaster platform." On the other end of the line, Alan let out a dry chuckle. "They actually did it?" "I've seen some short-sighted corporate moves in my 30 years of practice, George, but this is corporate suicide." "Did you sign anything?" "Not a thing," I replied. I walked out with my personal belongings. They've confiscated my work laptop, but they don't realize that laptop only holds a local client shell. The actual Bidmaster database engine is hosted on my Vanguard cloud servers. "Perfect," Alan said, his voice sharpening into professional focus. "Let's review the timeline. CIG's annual maintenance and licensing fee was due on October 1st, 2025. According to Section 12.3 of the software license agreement we drafted in 2008, the company had a 90-day cure period. That grace period officially expired at midnight on January 1st, 2026. They have been operating the software in default for over 40 days. Under the contract, we had the right to terminate the license immediately upon expiration of the cure period, but we chose to hold off. Now, with your termination without mutual written consent, CIG has committed a secondary material breach. We are fully within our rights to revoke access immediately." "I'm looking at the Vanguard Cloud Administration portal right now," I said, clicking through the security menus. "SIG's local network IP addresses are still making calls to my database. Their estimators are currently running quantity takeoffs for the Hamilton County bid. I see Tyler Caldwell's login active, attempting to export the concrete pricing structures. Pull the plug, George," Alan said. "Once you revoke the access keys, I will draft the formal cease and desist notice. I'll cite their non-payment since October 1st and your wrongful termination as grounds for immediate revocation under the terms of the 2008 agreement. We will warn them that any continued attempt to use, copy, or bypass the software structure will result in a federal copyright infringement lawsuit under Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 501. "Understood," I said. I positioned my cursor over the CIG API Credential Management panel. In my 18 years at CIG, I had built Bidmaster into a powerhouse. The local client installed on CIG's office computers was just an empty interface. It relied on secure HTTPS requests to call the Vanguard cloud server, which housed the actual relational database. This database contained proprietary algorithms that automatically calculated labor burden rates, union pension contributions, equipment mobilization costs, and seasonal fuel surcharges. It also contained 18 years of curated subcontractor data, detailing which local subcontractors were reliable, their historical bidding margins, and their safety compliance records. Without this live database, the local client was completely useless. It would display nothing but blank tables and broken formulas. With a single click, I disabled CIG's master API key. Then, I updated the cloud firewall rules, blocking all incoming traffic from CIG's corporate IP range. I sat back and watched the live server logs on my screen. Within seconds, the connection requests from CIG's office began to fail. I could see the error codes piling up. HTTP 403 forbidden. API key revoked at CIG's corporate headquarters. The chaos would be starting. The Hamilton County Transit Hub bid was due to the County Bidding Commission in exactly 3 days. The bidding deadline was set for Friday at noon, and CIG's estimators were in the middle of compiling a complex proposal. To visualize what was happening on their end, Tyler Caldwell and the remaining estimation team would be staring at their screens as the Bidmaster software froze. When they tried to refresh the page, the user interface would strip away all the active numbers, leaving behind blank columns. A bright red error banner would flash across the top of the application. Vanguard Cloud Server Connection Error. License terminated due to material breach of contract. Please contact Vanguard Estimating Systems, LLC. 5 minutes later, my personal cell phone began to ring. The caller ID showed CIG's corporate office. I ignored it. 10 minutes later, it rang again. This time it was Bradley Caldwell's direct line. I let it go to voicemail. 30 minutes later, my phone vibrated with a text message from Bradley. "George, what did you do to the estimating software? The system is down, and the estimators can't access the database. We are in the middle of a major bid. Get this fixed immediately, or we will sue you for sabotage." I forwarded the text message to Alan Fletcher. "Don't reply, George." Alan texted back. "I am sending the official cease and desist letter to their legal department and to Bradley's office via certified mail and email right now. Let them talk to me." By mid-afternoon, CIG's internal IT department was desperately trying to bypass the lockout. My server logs showed hundreds of unauthorized connection attempts coming from CIG's local network, trying to brute force the cloud API. I had set up the security protocols years ago. After 10 failed attempts from the same IP address, the firewall automatically blacklisted the entire subnet and flagged the activity as a cyber attack. C's IT director, a young guy named Marcus. Wait, Marcus is a forbidden name, let's check. Arthur, Kim, Luca, Lucas, Patrick, Russell, Andrew, Wayne, Christopher, Kenneth, Caleb, Austin, James, Bob, Chuck, Tom, Douglas, Marcus. Yes, Marcus is forbidden. Let's name CIG's IT director, Peter. Wait, Peter is not in the forbidden list. Let's use CIG's IT director, guy named Nicholas. Nicholas is not forbidden. Let's see, CIG's IT director, Nicholas, knew that they couldn't hack the Vanguard server. He would have to explain to Bradley that the data wasn't on their local machines. It was on my cloud servers, and they had no legal or technical way to access it. Meanwhile, Tyler Caldwell was left with a team of panicked estimators, an empty software shell, and 3 days to submit a $145 million bid. They were completely blind, and the clock was ticking. By Wednesday morning, the pressure inside Caldwell Infrastructure Group had reached a boiling point. CIG's legal department had received the cease and desist letter from Alan Fletcher. Bradley Caldwell, refusing to acknowledge the legal corner he had backed himself into, ordered CIG's corporate counsel to draft a response threatening a countersuit for breach of fiduciary duty and trade secret theft. He claimed that because I had built the database while working at CIG, the software belonged to them, despite the explicit wording of the 2008 license agreement. Alan Fletcher called me immediately after receiving CIG's response. "They're bluffing, George. Bradley is trying to intimidate us. Their corporate lawyer knows they don't have a leg to stand on. But Bradley is forcing his hand because the Hamilton County bid is due on Friday. They have no other way to get the numbers." "What are they doing in the estimation department?" I asked. "My contacts inside the office tell me it's an absolute disaster," Alan replied. "Tyler has his team copying old Excel spreadsheets from CIG 2012 archives. They are trying to manually reconstruct the bid. But their IT director, Nicholas, told Bradley that the old files don't have the current labor agreements or the 2026 material price indexes. They are flying completely blind. Indeed, civil construction costs had fluctuated wildly over the last 3 years. In Ohio, concrete and asphalt prices had risen by 38%, and steel prices were highly volatile. If CIG used estimating rates from 2012 or even 2022, They would either underbid the project so severely that CIG would lose millions on construction, or they would overbid and lose the project to Apex Civil Group. But Tyler Caldwell had an even bigger problem. He had promised his uncle, Donald Miller, that Miller Materials would secure the $36.8 million concrete contract. To hide the $4.8 million markup in the master bid, without the automated balancing algorithms of Bidmaster, Tyler had to manually shave money from other departments. He targeted the structural steel erection and the excavation labor estimates, slashing their projected man-hours by 40%. Tyler was too incompetent to realize that public infrastructure projects in Ohio are strictly governed by prevailing wage laws under Ohio Revised Code. Section 4115. These laws require contractors to pay union-scale hourly rates and benefits to all on-site laborers. By cutting the labor hours by 40%, Tyler was proposing a schedule that was physically impossible to complete with the required crew sizes, which violated the state's labor standards. On Thursday afternoon, Bradley Caldwell called Alan Fletcher directly, bypassing his own legal department in a fit of rage. "Fletcher, listen to me," Bradley screamed into the phone. "Tell George that if he doesn't reactivate the database access keys within the next 2 hours, I will file a police report for cyber sabotage. He is holding a $145 million public project hostage. We have 72 estimators and project managers sitting idle. This is costing us $50,000 a day in lost productivity." Alan remained completely unflustered. "Bradley, your company has been in default of the software license agreement since October 1st, 2025. You owe Vanguard Estimating Systems LLC $45,000 in unpaid maintenance fees. Furthermore, you terminated my client without mutual written consent, which under Section 12.3 of the agreement revoked your license automatically. Any continued use of Bidmaster or its copyrighted cost tables constitutes willful infringement under federal law. If you attempt to submit a bid using reports generated by my client's copyrighted database, we will file for an emergency injunction in federal court. We'll see about that." Bradley slammed the phone down on Friday morning at 11:30 a.m., exactly 30 minutes before the noon deadline. Tyler Caldwell personally delivered CIG's physical bid package to the Hamilton County Bidding Commission office. Because they had estimated the project manually, their total bid came out to $132 million. This was $13 million lower than CIG's original projection of $145 million. Tyler believed he was a genius. He had underbid Apex Civil Group's expected bid and still managed to keep his uncle's lucrative contract in the proposal, but the trap had already been set. At 10 o'clock that morning, 2 hours before the bid opening, Alan Fletcher filed a federal copyright infringement lawsuit in the United States District Court for the Southern District of Ohio under Civil Action No. 26, CV0084. The lawsuit, representing Vanguard Estimating Systems LLC, accused Caldwell Infrastructure Group of the unauthorized use and reproduction of copyrighted software models and database schemas. Along with the lawsuit, we filed a motion for an emergency temporary restraining order, TRO, to prevent CIG from utilizing any estimating reports, cost-benefit analyses, or proposal spreadsheets derived from the Bidmaster platform. Simultaneously, I submitted a formal, notarized whistleblower complaint to the Hamilton County Bidding Commission and the Ohio Department of Transportation. The complaint was backed by the files I had exported before my departure. I provided documented evidence that CIG's bid proposal relied on Miller Materials, an uncertified concrete supplier that had failed structural integrity tests on the Route 71 overpass. I also attached Tyler's internal draft emails, where he explicitly ordered the estimation team to artificially slash prevailing wage labor hours by 40% to absorb the $4.8 million markup for Miller Materials. Under Ohio Revised Code Section 9.3112, the County Commission was legally obligated to investigate any formal complaints regarding a bidder's responsiveness and responsibility before awarding a contract. At noon, the Bidding Commission closed the submission window. The public opening of the bids began in the county courthouse basement. Caldwell Infrastructure Group's bid of $132 million was indeed the lowest submitted. Apex Civil Group came in second at $141 million. Tyler Caldwell, who was sitting in the gallery, immediately texted his father that they had won the contract. He was already planning how to spend his share of the family kickback. He had no idea that within 24 hours, the federal court and the county commission would turn CIG's apparent victory into a public relations and financial catastrophe. On Monday morning, the hammer fell. The Hamilton County Bidding Commission convened an emergency session to review the bid submissions. Thanks to the detailed whistleblower complaint I had submitted, the commissioners did not have to look far to find discrepancies. The Commission's audit team cross-referenced CIG's labor allocation with the Ohio Department of Labor's prevailing wage schedules. They found that CIG's bid proposed using 24,000 fewer man-hours for the structural steel and excavation phases than the state-mandated minimum for a project of this scale. This was a clear attempt to bypass Ohio Revised Code Section 4115. Furthermore, when the commissioners contacted the Ohio Department of Transportation, they confirmed that Miller Materials was indeed uncertified for public bridge deck construction and had an active suspension warning on their file from the Route 71 overpass failure. At 10:30 a.m., the Bidding Commission issued a public statement. Caldwell Infrastructure Group's bid was officially disqualified. The commission cited material non-responsiveness and a failure to meet the requirements of a responsible bidder under Ohio Revised Code, Section 9.312. The contract was awarded to the second lowest bidder, Apex Civil Group, at their bid price of $141 million, but the financial damage to CIG was just beginning. Because CIG had submitted a bid and then been disqualified due to willful noncompliance and material misrepresentation, the county commission enforced the forfeiture of CIG's bid bond. In public works contracting, bidders must submit a bid bond equal to 10% of their total proposal as a guarantee of good faith. The bidding commission seized CIG's bid bond, resulting in an immediate $13.2 million cash penalty that CIG's surety company paid, which they immediately back-charged to CIG's corporate bank accounts. At the same time, the federal judge in the Southern District of Ohio signed the temporary restraining order. CIG was legally prohibited from accessing, copying, or utilizing any estimating files, databases, or derivative spreadsheets that had been touched by the Bidmaster system. CIG's entire pipeline of upcoming projects was instantly frozen. They could not estimate new jobs, adjust current project costs, or negotiate subcontractor changes without violating a federal court order. By Tuesday afternoon, the board of directors of Caldwell Infrastructure Group called an emergency session. Gerald Caldwell, the 72-year-old retired founder, was wheeled into the boardroom. Though physically frail, his mind was as sharp as ever, and he still controlled 42% of the company's voting shares. Gerald had been briefed on the situation by CIG's corporate counsel, who had made it clear that the company was facing a federal copyright lawsuit, a $13.2 million bid bond forfeiture, and potential criminal investigations into bid rigging and prevailing wage fraud. Bradley. Gerald's voice was soft but cut through the silent room like a razor. Explain to me how a $45,000 software fee turned into a $13 million loss in a federal injunction. Bradley Caldwell sat at the table, his face pale and sweating. Gerald, it was a business decision. George Henderson was trying to extort us for software that he built while on our payroll. We were just protecting our intellectual property, and the concrete contractor. Silence! Gerald slammed his hand on the table. You fired the man who built this company's bidding systems for 18 years. You fabricated a corporate espionage charge against him, which our own IT director has now admitted was created by Tyler. And you did all of this to force a $36 million concrete contract onto your brother-in-law, Donald Miller, whose company isn't even certified by the state. Tyler Caldwell tried to speak. Granduncle, we were just trying to save money on the labor. You are fired, Tyler, Gerald said, not even looking at him. Security will escort you out of this building immediately. And Bradley, you are stripped of your title as Executive VP of Operations. The board will vote today to strip you of all management authority. We will be cooperating fully with the county prosecutor regarding the bid tampering, and you can explain your business decisions to the state investigators. 2 hours later, CG's corporate counsel contacted Alan Fletcher. They wanted to settle. They knew that if the copyright lawsuit went to trial, the statutory damages for using my copyrighted software templates on dozens of previous projects could exceed, say, $5 million. And the injunction would permanently destroy their business. The negotiations were swift and entirely on my terms. CIG signed a comprehensive settlement agreement that included 1. The immediate payment of $320,000 in accrued bonuses from the Warren County, Route 42, and Mason retail projects, plus 10% interest. 2. A licensing settlement payment of $1,200,000 to Vanguard Estimating Systems LLC, covering past copyright infringement damages, and a new, non-revocable, 5-year cloud access license for the Bidmaster software. This license, however, was limited to read-only historical data, meaning they could not use my active pricing algorithms to bid on new projects. 3. A formal, written letter of apology from the board of directors, retracting all accusations of corporate espionage and acknowledging my 18 years of exemplary service. 4. The immediate termination of Bradley and Tyler Caldwell from all association with the company. The total settlement wire transfer of $1,520,000 cleared into Vanguard Estimating Systems bank account on February 27, 2026. The day after the settlement cleared, I received a phone call from Lawrence Stone, the CEO of Apex Civil Group. "George," Lawrence said, a warm tone in his voice. "We just secured the Hamilton County Transit Hub project. It's a massive job, and we want to make sure it's managed perfectly. I know you've retired from CIG, but I'd like to bring you on as a senior consultant. We'll pay you a monthly advisory fee of $20,000. And we want to purchase a full operational license for your Bidmaster software for our entire estimating division." "I think we can make that work, Lawrence," I smiled. "Today, I spend my mornings consulting from my home office overlooking the river. I work about 10 hours a week helping Apex Civil Group build the very transit hub I spent months estimating. Bradley and Tyler Caldwell are currently under investigation by the State Attorney General's Office for Public Procurement Fraud, and Miller Materials has filed for bankruptcy after being permanently debarred from public contracts in Ohio. Sometimes, greedy people think they can steal the foundation of your house and not expect the roof to collapse on their heads. They forgot that, in the construction business, you never cut corners on the foundation. And in my case, the foundation was written in code."